You wouldn't believe it if I told you, my HOA claimed the paint on my house was illegal. Not too bright, not too flashy, not even unusual. Just a soft, cream color, my wife and I picked because it reminded us of the little cottage where we first met. However, the HOA deemed it a crime against the neighborhood. And they thought they could scare me into changing it. Before I share what happened next, let me say this: if you enjoy real stories of ordinary homeowners standing up to unfair HOAs and winning, don't forget to subscribe. You'll always have a front row seat to justice being served. Now, back to the nightmare. It all started on a quiet Saturday morning. I was sipping my coffee when I heard a knock on the door. On the porch stood Mr. Green, the HOA president, holding a clipboard like it were a weapon. "Your house paint violates Section 14, subsection B of the community bylaws," he said flatly. I frowned. That can't be right. We checked the handbook before we painted. It says neutral earth tones permitted. This is cream. He shook his head with a smirk. It's off-white. That's not on the approved list. You'll need to repaint within 30 days. Or face fines. I almost laughed, but his serious face stopped me. You're joking, right? This is harassment. His reply was cold. Rules are rules. Non-compliance will not be tolerated. Over the next week, the notices started. Bright orange papers stuck to my door. Violation. Daily fines applied. The first was $100. Then $200. By the end of the month, they claimed I owed over $2,000 for paint. My wife, Ellen, was distraught. "We don't have the money for this. And the paint looks fine." "I'm not backing down," I told her. "If they want to fight, they'll get one." Things got worse at the next HOA meeting. Green stood at the front like a king on his throne. "Mr. Carter," he said, pointing at me in front of everyone, "you are in violation and must comply. The fines will continue until you repaint." I stood tall. The bylaws allow neutral colors. Cream is neutral. This is abuse of power. A few neighbors nodded in agreement, but most stayed quiet, afraid of crossing green. That night, Ellen sighed at the dinner table. "Maybe we should just repaint, honey. It's not worth the stress." But I slammed my hand on the table. "No. If we give in now, they'll think they can bully anyone. I'd rather stand in court than roll over." And that's exactly what I prepared to do. I gathered every piece of evidence I could: photos of other houses in the neighborhood with nearly identical shades, receipts proving I'd followed the rules, and even an email from the previous HOA president approving the paint color years ago. When the official summons came in the mail, the HOA versus James Carter, I didn't panic. I smiled. Because I knew once we stood before a judge, the truth would finally matter. Ellen looked at me nervously. "Do you really think we can win?" I squeezed her hand. "Not just think. I know." And as our court date drew near, I realized something important: the HOA had no idea what was coming. The morning of the court hearing, I put on my best suit. Ellen gave me a worried smile as we stood in the hallway. "Are you ready for this?" she whispered. I nodded. Ready as I'll ever be. The HOA board sat on the opposite side of the courtroom. Mr. Green looked smug, tapping his pen against a stack of papers like he'd already won. But the moment the judge walked in, I felt the balance shift. This wasn't Green's kingdom anymore. "Case number 2748, the clerk announced. Homeowners Association versus James Carter." The judge peered over his glasses. "Mr. Green, you may present your case." Green stood tall, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, the defendant has violated community bylaws by painting his home an unauthorized color. It is off-white, which is not on the approved list. The HOA has issued fines, but the defendant refuses to comply." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Do you have a copy of this approved color list?" Green nodded and handed over a paper. The judge studied it, then looked at me. "Mr. Carter, your response?" I stood, my heart steady. Yes, Your Honor. The bylaws clearly state that neutral earth tones are permitted. The color I used is cream, a neutral shade. I have photographs of multiple homes in the neighborhood painted in nearly identical colors, with no violations issued. I handed over the photos. The judge examined them, then glanced back at Green. Mr. Green, how do you explain this? Green's face tightened. Those were approved years ago. Standards change. I couldn't hold back. Your Honor, I also have an email from the former HOA president, dated before we painted, explicitly stating this color was acceptable. I handed it forward. The judge read it, then actually chuckled. This seems clear. Anything else, Mr. Green? Green sputtered, his voice rising. It doesn't look neutral. It disrupts the uniformity of the community. That's when the judge laughed, out loud. The sound echoed through the courtroom, and even Ellen couldn't suppress a grin. Mr. Green, the judge said firmly, the law does not enforce your personal taste. Cream paint is not illegal. The HOA has overstepped its authority. The gavel came down. Case dismissed. Mr. Carter, you are free of all fines. The HOA will reimburse his legal costs immediately. Gasps filled the courtroom. Green's face went pale as neighbors whispered behind him. I leaned toward him and said quietly, looks like the court didn't like your color either. Walking out of that courthouse felt like stepping into sunlight after a storm. Ellen hugged me tight, tears in her eyes. You did it, she whispered. But the story didn't end there. Word spread fast around the neighborhood. At the next HOA meeting, Green tried to act like nothing had happened, but the crowd wasn't having it. One resident stood up and shouted, why are we paying dues to fight homeowners in court over paint? Another added, you wasted our money on your vendetta. For the first time, Green looked small. He stammered, tried to regain control, but the community had seen through him. Within months, he was voted out, and a new, fairer board took his place. Neighbors started dropping by my house, some even knocking on the door. Thank you, one said. I was too afraid to speak up. You saved us all from his nonsense, another added. I'd never felt prouder. Not because I beat them in court, but because I showed the community that you don't have to bow to bullies. And every morning when I step outside, I see the sunlight hitting that cream-colored paint. It doesn't just shine on my house. To me, it shines on justice. Here's the truth I learned. When people abuse power, they forget one thing: eventually, someone will stand tall, and the law will see right through them. And when that happens, well, even the court can't help but laugh.